Welcome to Must See Films. This is a channel where I create video essays and podcasts to help you develop the courage and be the artist as I document my own study of film. My name's Darren, and this is episode 95. In today's episode, we're going to cover various different topics. The first being my YouTube hiatus. What have I been doing? What have I been up to? The second being screenwriting, writing advice, writing resources, a little chat about current goals, and a couple of listener questions. We're going to open today's podcast with a reading from a book by Steven Pressfield called The War of Art. This is from a chapter called Break Through the Blocks and Win the Inner Creative Battles. Here we go. Resistance outwits the amateur with the oldest trick in the book. It uses his own enthusiasm against him. Resistance gets us to plunge into a project with over-ambitious and unrealistic timetable for its completion. It knows that we can't sustain that level of intensity. We will hit the wall, we will crash. The professional, on the other hand, understands delayed gratification. He is the ant, not the grasshopper. He is the tortoise, not the hare. The professional arms himself with patience, not only to give the stars time to align in his career, but to keep himself from flaming out in each individual work. He knows that any job, whether it's a novel or a kitchen remodel, takes twice as long as he thinks and costs twice as much. He accepts that. He recognizes it as reality. So, let's talk about my YouTube hiatus. I finished on a video essay called What I Learned from 22 Weeks of Video Essays in a Row. Now, to take you back to that time, I was making a video every single Monday, and I did this for 22 weeks. I would spend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday coming up with a topic, doing a bit of research. I would write the video essay Thursday, Friday. I would gather all of the footage and record the audio Saturday. I would edit an entire video Sunday, upload Sunday night, release Monday morning. That was the schedule for like 22 weeks. Now, there was good things about that and there was bad things about that. The good things were I got better at video essays just through sheer practice. My subscriber count went up. That's pretty cool. There was more engagement because I was doing regular videos. People would come back and be like, yeah, Monday is the upload day. So there was more of a continual conversation. That was cool. The things that frustrated me about this period was this channel is really a byproduct of my own study of film. And it should really be a sideline to the primary goal, which is to learn filmmaking and make films. And I was getting frustrated because I was putting so much time and effort into making these videos that I had no time and I had no creative energy left to write scripts and take steps in the direction of making films. So I had to make a choice, and what I chose to do was put the channel down, stop making video essays at a time where I was getting into a really good flow of things, because bigger picture, the aim and the purpose of the channel was heading in the direction of making films. And what I decided to do for almost like a year, like 8 months to a year, was really immerse myself into storytelling, into writing, into creation, and trying to learn what it means to be a screenwriter. Because the route that I have figured out for myself is filmmaker through being a screenwriter. And from everywhere I've kind of looked for inspiration and looked for advice is learning to become a writer before you are a director, or as a means to become a director is everywhere. So that's the route that I've taken down. partly because a lot of my video essays and the way that my mind works naturally is I'm pretty good at breaking down films, like reverse engineering and seeing all of the moving pieces to create this bigger whole. It's a completely different set of skills, like completely different set of skills to create something from nothing. Now it helps the fact that I've been studying film and figuring stuff out on my own for a while, but I had never really dug into screenwriting before. It's this whole other language. It has just a totally different set of problems. And so I needed to get into that, and that's what I did for that time. Now, the period of the 8 months went like this. I was in such a role of making YouTube videos that I thought I'll just switch gears, I'll go filmmaking, and then boom, I'll have a script in no time. Well, instead of it being a shift of gears, it was like a crash. It was like a halt. And the brakes were on big time. And I found it really difficult to go from consistent productivity and publication to a much slower, steadier, uncertain, difficult, unknown process of trying to write. And it was really frustrating, and I really struggled with it. And I struggled because I wanted to accumulate pages, but in order to really get pages, I had to have, an outline, because I knew about the macro level of a story leading towards the ending payoff, and I knew about the structure of the hero's myth, and I knew about all of these things that could lead to a fantastic payoff, and how every scene is a smaller piece of a bigger whole that leads to this unity to climax, right? So I was aware of that. But the thing that I struggle with the most is just writing a scene by itself so that it was standalone, so that it was its own thing. And so that as you're reading your script or watching that film, that you could enjoy that moment by itself, and you're not just waiting to get to this ending payoff. And so that was frustrating, because I couldn't just continue the pace. I had to stop. I had to figure things out. I had to go back and reflect. I had to read a lot of books. And it wasn't as fast as I thought it would be. And that's why I always come back to Stephen Pressfield's book, because it's became a bit of a cult hit in the way that every creative person and artist can relate to the struggle of resistance and how much it takes to go through the personal inner struggle of trying to do it. And so what I'd like to do with you is share some of my resources, share some of the lessons that I learned, and just so that if anybody else out there has an inkling of creative ambition in them and thinks, well, this is going to be way too hard, well, maybe not. Maybe if you put in the work, and maybe if you learn a couple of things along the way, maybe you could do it. And that's inspiring, and that's exciting for me, because I know where I started, which was completely lost, and I know where I am now, which is still lost, but like a little bit more clarity with what's going on. And so I talk to you here from not really like a guru point of view where I'm like, hey, check me out, I know lots of stuff. It's more the point of view of, let me document and give you a transparent look of this honest ambition towards doing something, making something. And I bet there's loads of people who are in the same boat with this kind of thing. And I know that 5 years ago or 10 years ago, these are the kind of things that I needed to hear. And so I bet you there's somebody out there that could benefit from it. Let's move on to writing advice. First thing to know, you will always be bad in the beginning. You have to give yourself permission to write badly in order to get to the good stuff. And it's not that you can study more and then all of a sudden the first couple of pages that you write will be better. Regardless of how much you study, the first couple of pages are going to be bad. The first couple of scripts are going to be bad. You're just not going to know all the patterns and rhythms and rules. You're just not going to know. It would be impossible for you to know, because screenwriting and filmmaking and things of that kind of nature take a lifetime of dedication to master that craft. And so in order to get momentum, in order to get into a phase of continual creation, you have to suspend your judgment, your personal judgment, and to not edit yourself too much, and to begin and give yourself, allow yourself that so that you can create. That was something I struggle with, and I hope helps other people. Another little nugget of advice that I heard somewhere was don't get it right, get it written. And that's huge for me, because we'll go on to shortly about turning pro, and that's kind of what Stephen Pressfield's other book is called, and that was the approach that I took. But the idea that we're talking about now, which is you put so much pressure on yourself to make this film that's going to be amazing, and you study great films, and you know what makes a good film, and then you go to make something and it's rubbish, and you put so much pressure on yourself, and it's horrible and frustrating, and so you feel like giving up, or you feel like not even starting, and that's the worst, because then you can't even make any progress. So don't get it right, get it written. Here is a couple of writing resources that I have found incredibly useful. For those who follow along on my Instagram page, which is /must-see-films/, I share lots of stuff there. I share movies that I recommend. I share behind-the-scene pictures of me creating stuff. I share a lot of book recommendations, a lot of writing things that are going on, a couple of quotes and stuff. I mean, right into Instagram recently. It's pretty cool, and there's some awesome channels out there too, which I've been enjoying following. But these books are on the Instagram. So, number one book I would recommend is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. The main part of that book that is useful is a ritual that she calls morning pages. It's where you wake up first thing in the morning, you do this pre-input before you've had a chance for the day to take over your life, and you own the morning by saying, I'm going to write 2 pages. And it's not like screenplay pages, it's just like a freehand, free writing. Let me just document and unload whatever is in my mind onto paper, so that you, number one, build momentum and get the pen moving. You get whatever is in your head onto paper, and therefore somehow digest it by going through that process. And you're already into movement by the time you finish those pages, and it helps you start whatever the project is next. I do a lot of journaling this way, and it's very, very useful. Useful in terms of filmmaking, but also useful in terms of life, about getting baggage that you would be carrying around in your mind, so that you don't have to deal with that, and you can really focus on what is a creative, important project to you. Next book, K.M. Weiland's Creating Character Arcs. This is a great book. She really taught me about the integration of characters and plot, and how they are not separate, they are the same thing, and how because of something happening to a character, that means something is also happening to the plot. And so her book walks you through a kind of 3-act structure of a character's spine and where a story would go, and how that's reflected in the conflict that characters would be in different scenes, and therefore the plot. It's a really easy to follow book. It gives a lot of examples from classic films like Toy Story and Star Wars and other books, and it's a really, really useful, clever, well-documented book. Highly recommended. I would also recommend, in that kind of screenwriting kind of guru book, The Anatomy of Story by John Truby. I think he talks about 22 different rules. Very, very clever. It gives you a lot of different questions to prompt towards yourself to help you figure things out. Sometimes the answer could be right in front of you, and you can't see it because you just don't know to look for it. But the fact that this book asks you very specific questions, it helps you arrive at different different things. And again, brings lots of awesome examples from films. And that's kind of the thing for me, that it helps it sink into knowledge for me. So next, there is, I'm so excited to talk to this next part. There is a video essay series on YouTube. I think if you Google the art of story, I think it's about 10 episodes maybe, and it's incredible. It's maybe the best video essay I've maybe ever came across, like all 10 of them. It's maybe the best communicated delivery and the best content in terms of story structure and narrative knowledge that I've ever came across. And it's all integrated into this 10 video series. And the crazy thing that I just don't understand is there's barely any views on like any of his videos. And it's like astounding stuff. Like I went through every single video and I took notes on stuff because there was so much stuff in there that I didn't know and that made so much sense. And I know it's right because I feel it when it's right. And my kind of truth buzzer goes off in my mind and I'm like, boom, this guy's speaking the truth because he knows what he's talking about. And I can see it in other movies. And so people need to check out this guy's videos, the Art of Story video series on YouTube. Check it out. Next, The Story Grid by Sean Coyne. He also helped Stephen Pressfield. I think the two of them together have a production company and they released the book, The War of Art, and Stephen Pressfield's other kind of smaller books. And he's been an editor, like a novelist, editor, story editor for 25 years. And he broke down his process of, well, I guess breaking down a structured story, and he called it the story grid. And he talked about breaking it into scenes, and he talked about breaking it into values and the overarching emotional story that would go along with it. And it's easy to read. There's a podcast that you can follow along with. It has lots of conversation and dialogue about the story grid itself, but the book is available as a hardback and also a PDF. Very useful. If you want to check it out, check it out. The next one we're going to talk about, which is going to bring us to the next topic of conversation, is Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. Now, The War of Art is the kind of cult classic. So many people, so many artists have been drawn to this book because it speaks the language of dealing with the self-doubt and resistance that every artist faces. But for me, it's like, who cares? Everybody has to deal with that. Give me the practical solutions. And that's why I think the more important book is Turning Pro, which is the next book. Turning Pro is the solution of professionalism to approach dealing with the resistance. So, for example, you need to beat that resistance every single day. He talks about the battle must be fought anew every day. And that's the absolute truth, because if you have a great day of writing and you go to bed and you wake up in the morning, that resistance is back again. And until you conquer that resistance that day, you have to carry around the mental and emotional weight of that resistance. And so a couple of tips that I have found useful is to schedule a specific time within each day so that life doesn't take over and you don't get it done. The way that I have managed to do that is to write first thing in the morning, sometimes between 6 and 8, so that I can write before I go to work. And that way, I'm uninterrupted. That way, I've already conquered the resistance before I go to work, and I actually feel lighter and better for the rest of the day. And if something happens, or if I don't get up in time, and then if I haven't written, then work is a drag, because not only do I have to go to work and I haven't created anything, but I still know that I have to face that when I go home. And the longer you leave that resistance unbeaten, it becomes more and more difficult to face, and then it's overwhelming. It's like overwhelming, I'm sure, for any artist. One of the things that I started doing was tracking the days in a row in which I had conquered the resistance, in the days which I had written, right? And so I would just tally. I would do tallies of 5, and then I would just keep going. And what happened was, even if I didn't have an incredible day of writing, if I merely maintained the momentum, the next day would be a really good day of writing. And by not breaking that chain, it really helps you do 2 things. Number 1, not let the resistance win. Number 2, keep the story or whatever it is you're working on in your subconscious, so that even if you're not actively working on it, your mind is mulling over it in the background. And so the next day when you show up to work, something's going to be there. There's going to be ideas, there's going to be solutions to problems, and that's going to be important. So momentum, hugely important. The next piece of advice comes from John Cleese on a little lecture that he did about creativity. And he talked about having a specific space where you work, and he talked about having a specific time that you start and time when you stop, so that you can face a problem and then you can put it down and you can be relieved the rest of the day. Those things are crucial. But the line that he said that got me was, he said that in order to not just figure out problems to your screenwriting, in order to come up with creative solutions, is you have to bear the anxiety of the unsolved problem. So when you have a problem, you feel anxious, and you don't feel better until you have solved that problem. Now, you can solve that problem in lots of different ways. You can solve it in a way that makes you feel better because you do it quickly, but that might not necessarily be the most creative solution or the best thing to serve the story. And so he said, compared to some of the other people that he worked with on Monty Python, that his scripts were always better because he would bear the anxiety longer than other people, so that he could eventually arrive at something more creative and interesting. I reckon the first 5-10 minutes of any day of writing is horrible. It's like the beginning of meditation. Your mind's everywhere. You can't settle. You don't want to be there. You hate everything. And then eventually you'll kind of forget all that nonsense, and you'll get to work, and you come up with different problems. But the longer you can stay in that, the longer that you can push through those resistance feelings, the more it's going to help you reach different solutions. That has been my experience, and that has been some advice from John Cleese. I'd like to read for you here a little quote from Akira Kurosawa, and it's some advice to screenwriters and filmmakers. This was something that spoke to me, and it's part of the reason why I'm taking the approach that I'm taking just now. So here we go. In order to write scripts, you must first study the great novels and dramas of the world. You must consider why they are great. Where does the emotion come from that you feel as you read them? What degree of passion did the author have to have? What level of meticulousness did he have to command in order to portray the characters and events as he did? You must read thoroughly to the point where you can grasp all of these things. You must also see great films. You must read great screenplays and study the theories of great directors. If your goal is to become a director, you must master screenwriting. Boom. That's why I'm writing just now. That's why I'll talk about another piece of advice in a second. That's why I'm focusing on story, because a great little idea that I came across from the Tim Ferriss podcast ages ago from Josh Waitzkin was the idea of creating smaller circles. And so if you take filmmaking as a topic and you kind of go from the out of a circle and you spiral inward to the absolute center, you arrive at storytelling. Story is the thing that gives the character. Story is the thing that informs performance. And story is the thing that helps you decide what the lighting should be like and use every single tool of filmmaking. Story is the most important thing. So that's where I'm focusing my energy and my time. And so just to hear Akira Kurosawa, incredible director, give that piece of advice that is also being mirrored in loads of other people that I've researched looking for these kind of nuggets. They say the same thing, which is if your goal is to be a film director, you must master screenwriting. And one of the things that I avoided for a long time because I just hated the idea of doing it was reading screenplays. And I eventually gave in the idea because I wasn't good at screenplays, number one. I wasn't familiar with screenplays, number two. And I didn't understand how the screenplay format was a blueprint for what I saw on screen. Because the way that I studied films and the way that I kind of broke down films and learned it was through film theory, through this is what's on screen and this is what it's telling me. This is why the lighting's this way. This is why it's been shot this way. This is why it's juxtaposition-wise at this part of the film because it connects to this. This is a parallel scene that runs along with this other thing, and these are the connections. These two scenes are in conversation with each other. That's the kind of stuff that I figured out. The script was like a whole other language to me. And so anyway, I go over that and I decided to read 10 pages of screenplay every day. And at the moment, I'm on my 5th screenplay. I've read The Incredibles, which was awesome. And, oh, this is interesting. The Incredibles was exactly the script, which is exactly the film. Because obviously they animate from the script and they voice over from the script, and then that becomes the movie, and that's how they do it at Pixar, or maybe with any animated film, I don't know. But then I read Back to the Future, and there's so many different things within Back to the Future that's different in the film. So many things that change through the development and production and the editing. Even the opening 5 minutes is not. It's not the scene with Doc Brown's house and the guitar and then the explosion and the plutonium underneath the bed and the skateboard. There's none of that in the opening 5 minutes of the script. The 5 minutes of the script is Marty McFly in detention, and he sets off the fire alarm with this bubblegum thing that he shoots off to the ceiling, and it's really weird, but it's totally different. So that was one of the things I noticed. So I read Back to the Future. I read The Incredibles. I read The Truman Show, which was awesome. I'm currently reading Eternal Sunshine. There was another one. What was the other? Oh, I read Shame. That was good too. Enjoyed that a lot. Pretty close to the final film. Eternal Sunshine, I was a little scared to take on that one because, I mean, that film is just incredible and it's everywhere, and I thought that would be difficult to make sense of and be clear where you were. But it's very easy to follow, and I can see how the format of the screenplay and the way that it's presented would help you envision that film and then create that movie. And that's the whole point of it. So it's a huge learning process for me. I also can learn from reading how things are formatted and things that you can do that I never realized you could do. Like if you wanted to show a scene or put a little note a specific way, when I see people do it, I'm like, oh, right, I never knew you could do that. And so it's a learning process. And so that brings me to the current stage of my goals, I guess, which is writing to get better as a screenwriter. I would love to rush out and make a film now just to say that I had done it and kind of relieve myself of the anxiety of, you've got a film to make it out there. But I know I can't. I know I have to get better with this writing thing first. I know so much more now that I just did not know like a year ago. And I'm not like amazing yet, but I'm so much better. So there's a lot more work to be done. And so I'm going to spend time here till the time is right. I'm going to try and be very aggressive about it and try and do lots of work. But I trust and have faith in the feeling that says right now's the time. When that feeling comes up in me, I'll know it's time to go and to do it. So that's it. What I would like to hear from you guys is if you could comment below any questions that you have about screenwriting, or if you'd like to share your experience of the struggle that you have faced as an artist or a creative person. But one of the huge things that I realized is to beat that resistance, it's just about courage. I heard that Stephen Pressfield read a little prayer to himself every day before he would begin his work. And so I wrote myself a little prayer also, and it's to do with sacrifice and it's to do with courage. And that's why I'm kind of shifting this channel to the idea of develop the courage and be the artist, because that's the defining character trait that is necessary to bring something from an idea into existence. And that's it. So there is a few ways that you can support this channel if you would like. The first is to subscribe on YouTube and comment. I'll always get back to you. The second way is through Patreon. It's a way you can donate any amount. It's kind of like a tip jar for artists. And the best place to follow me at the moment is Instagram, because, well, I'm right into Instagram at the moment. I'm sharing lots of books and behind the scene pictures, and it's a pretty cool little social media platform that I have spent no time on, but have kind of got into recently. So that's it. If you are a creative person out there and you are struggling, have patience, keep going, get a simplistic, consistent habit that you can build into your life that's going to help you chip away at the craft necessary to develop yourself.